Welcome everyone to another Machinations webinar. We're very excited to continue our journey into the metaverse. This time we have the kind folks at Rec Room joining us. We're going to be talking about game design, and we're going to be talking about the importance of social and user-generated content, for the metaverse, and how that's actually one of the leading things when it comes to metaverse and virtual worlds, and having players be part of the creation or co-creation process. So we're very excited to discuss this today. So we're Machinations, we're the game balancing platform, and lately we've been looking a lot at the metaverse. So this is gonna align really well with today's topic. So what we're going to be covering is the evolution of user-generated content, why it's becoming more prevalent, how Rec Room enables creators to make games easily, how Rec Room manages creative classes and learning for their players. We're going to discuss people or players as content and performance UGC. So I'm Mohammed, I'm a game designer and I handle game design relations at Machinations.io. And Mihai, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, I'm a co-founder and CEO. Hi, everyone. Then whatever it says in the tagline, subtext. Nice to see you all.
All right. Christopher, can you give us an intro?
Yeah, I'm Christopher Audrey. I'm relatively new to Rec Room. I am the lead community designer here, and I've spent most of my career in mobile, free-to-play, social design, and I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks for being here. And Audrey, can you give us a quick intro?
Yeah, hi, Audrey. I am a systems designer on the Logic team, which is a subset of our larger UGC team. I have been at Rec Room for forever, but I'm relatively new to design. I started as an artist, and I always say lovingly, got bullied into it. Yeah, that's what I work on, primarily the Logic system and the little things that let you have an effect in a room as a creator.
I would say thankfully you got bullied into it.
Yeah, it's great. I'm loving it.
Awesome. And we'll kick off. So one of the first points I wanted to tackle is, from the very beginning, how UGC started in the early days, the tools that were there, and how that sort of evolved to today. With these big virtual spaces, social spaces, and quote unquote what we call the metaverse, and where it's going in the future. And the important part is what are the tools that are going to enable creators to co-create with the designers going forward?
I can speak a little of the history, at least in Rec Room. It's been a very interesting journey. 4 years ago or so, we were kind of just like the Wii Sports of VR. We had some first-party sports-like games and experiences. We had just added our first co-op dungeon crawler quest. We were VR only, and we were taking a lot of cues from our player base at that point. What we wanted to make, what they wanted us to make. And one of our games was Charades, which had this hot glue gun, and it was really like the drawing version whose name is trademarked. You go up on stage, you draw based on a card, people guess, you hit a button if they get it right. So we're like, well, what if you could do more with this pen? Cam, our creative director, like hacked in a way to wear it, basically made it stick to you. And that was a lot of fun. And then we had some players who were organizing on their own to do game nights where they would meet up on a paintball map, but then not play paintball. They would play hide and seek or something else instead, have a murder mystery dinner party. So we're like, okay, let's combine these. And it was very step-by-step. At first, you could make a private copy of a room and draw some stuff, and you couldn't even save it yet. And then you could save it, but all you could really do was draw stuff. And then one of our devs kind of made the first version of the circuit system over his Christmas break as a personal project. Just a bunch of switches and gates. And we're like, oh, okay, this has legs. And people really took off with it. We were amazed, especially in those early days, by what people managed to do with what we had given them. Even before we officially had anything that would let you move shapes, we had a dartboard that the dart applies a very small forward impulse so that it flies straight. So somebody made an airport where they put just like a fulcrum underground with a dart in it to very slowly rotate this thing in a circle, and then attached a plane to it way up here, so the plane was moving. So we joined this room and there's a moving airplane, and we're like, how did they do that? So we had to like make a copy and go find the dart. So people just want to do more and more crazy stuff with it, and we're kind of just trying to facilitate it. We take a lot of cues from what people are trying to do and not quite able to do yet. That's where the second circuit systems came from. It's the first one's pretty powerful, but it's very limited by the choices we made in terms of like networking tick rate and physics tick rate and stuff like that. And you just can't make stuff that's super robust. So we're like, okay, let's fix that. Let's have this new version of circuits. A little more flexible. It's quite a bit more powerful at the cost of some cognitive load. So now the focus is on how do we make it so that people can figure it out on their own without having to know computer science. Yeah, ultimately we look at it a lot like, like you can't have a metaverse without people building. If it's companies delivering apps, it isn't really the metaverse. The metaverse implies the social substrate of people contributing, people being there. And like any physical place where people gather, it's more about participation than it is about consumption.
Yeah, exactly. And we do the same thing on the social side, take cues from what our players want. 3 years ago, there was an event called RecCon that our players pretty much put on themselves. And then the following year, it was a little bit bigger and we tried to add more panels. This year, we put a lot of work into having a multi-instance event system, because previous 2 years, only 40 people could attend each event. And at one point, one of the events had 1,000 people signed up for it to go, and only 40 people got to go to that event. This year, we created a system where any number of people could see an event and watch people talking through the multi-instance technology. And it was huge, incredible success, way more than we anticipated, 100,000 people over the course of the weekend and more showing up and participating in this virtual PAX that we've created. And we expect it to get bigger and bigger and continue to do things like that our players want to do socially within the game and build their own social meetups and social hangout spaces.
It's funny because we don't really use the term metaverse internally much. We were just kind of doing our own thing, and then it became a buzzword underneath us. And it's like, yeah, this is kind of what we're going for, just like a digital place that people value in the same way that they would their, the mall in the 80s, where it's just a place you hang out, and then there's other stuff there too.
That's very interesting because and this ties into a question we got, which is, when we look at sort of like this co-creation process and we see, great and interesting and unique creations or games, what does that mean for, those creators, right? Does that sort of like lead to something bigger? Do you look at your co-creators as, potential hires? Where does the sort of like process end for these people? Is it just about creating for the sake of creating, or is there something bigger that the players are looking forward to?
Yeah, as far as potential hires, real quick, the one of the people that started using that glue gun to create things and started making events and YouTube videos around that early in the beginning has been our trust and safety lead for almost 4 years now. So yes, we definitely hire a lot of people out of the community. They know what to do best, and they know how the game works better than we do sometimes. So yeah, Audrey, please.
Yeah, I mentioned the sardines games that people would organize in paintball, and that organizer is now one of our team leads. And we've hired a few folks, especially some of the best creators. We've got a team of people who we get a lot of signal from them on what needs to be fixed and what features they're missing, but they also make a ton of amazing looking stuff. They made all the rooms for RecCon. In terms of just other folks being a creator and where that can go, like we do hope it goes somewhere. It doesn't have to. A lot of people just do it for fun. A lot of them are teenagers just learning how to program by using our language, and it kind of tickles me pink that people are actually able to feel like they're learning programming by using our circuits. We've got a bunch of folks who are teachers and professionals who just kind of pop in and make stuff for fun. There are a lot of the best rooms are made in teams of people. They'll get somebody for the character creation and somebody for the circuits and somebody for the sound design. And we do think one of the most important parts of hosting a metaverse platform is that the creators, like, they get something out of it. We've just started a payback program fairly recently where you can earn tokens in your rooms and then trade those out for real money. And that's pretty important. We'd love to see people making their living making good content in Rec Room someday.
And we do have currently 2 groups right now that are starting their own companies inside of Rec Room. One of which did a room for Soap and Glory, and got that advertising money from them to create a Soap and Glory room in Rec Room. Had nothing to do with us. We didn't set it up. We weren't involved in it until it happened, and we were like, "Oh man, this is amazing!" So yeah, that's currently happening right now, and that is really, really exciting.
I think one of the strengths of having the creation be in game is that it becomes a kind of content itself, right? The social building is a big part of why people get into it initially, because you can go make a thing with your friends for your friends, and then other people want to play it, and now I can make money with it. You can do the modeling, the animation, the programming, and the distribution all in one place without having to download any other software, without having to have a deep base of knowledge going into it. So yeah, hopefully it'll really help a bunch of people find stuff approachable that is pretty difficult to do outside an environment like that.
Yeah, and not all. Some of the best games that are made right now in Rec Room don't have a lot of UGC content to them all. They're entirely social. One comes to mind that's called Last One to Fall Wins a Bubbly. And a bubbly is just a champagne bottle. Just the general game design of it is you hold on to a post and the last person to fall wins a bubbly. And it's essentially a game show with very, very minimal UGC content, but it makes a lot of money, and the creator is basically a game show host and puts on a performance and has all these wacky things going on while they're playing this game. And it's one of the smartest, best, most simple game designs that I've seen in Rec Room. And I'm super excited we're going to be able to promote more things like that more, and really build up our game show community, which exists right now and is growing, and also our theater community, our musicians and DJs. We have a large, tight-knit community of DJs that hold raves and parties in Rec Room now. So we want to support those types of content makers as well. All of this is going to go. Anything you want to be in real life, you should be able to walk into Rec Room and be. If I want to be a DJ, I want to be a musician, you can do that. And that's the kind of stuff that we're supporting. And
shout out to the Orange Bucket acting troupe. They've been trying to do theater in Rec Room since before we supported it whatsoever. Yep. And now they've got theater with a bunch of set change stuff that's circuit driven. They can hit a button and the new set will slide in and the curtains will open and close. And they've written, I think, 3 like full-length plays now. They did Back to the Future, they did Princess Bride, and I forget the other. They were great. Anyway.
One of the guys that started it is actually on my team, is an engineer now. So another one that we've grabbed from the game.
That's very interesting. And it sort of ties into, this idea of you were saying you want players to walk into Rec Room and be whatever they want to be. How do you connect players to the right kind of content?
Yeah, so that's something that we don't have a lot of tools for currently. Obviously, we're creating a recommendation system. We're creating a better club system. Right now, it's word of mouth. Right now, people go in, they search around. We have our hot list that has an algorithm behind it to try and get people to things that are interesting. But for the most part, it's searching around and finding stuff. And we've been as successful as we are with that small amount of recommendation services. So we're really going to be building into that in the future, because being able to have a dream in Rec Room and realize a dream in Rec Room is super important, and being able to get connected with people who are like-minded and part of the sub community is a big part of that. There is currently a high learning curve to use the Maker Pen. So getting together with people who already know how, who can teach you. We have classes that we put on regularly that of all levels to bring people up in Maker Pen skill. And I think right now that's probably the primary way for like-minded people to meet each other. People make a lot of friends in those classes and join groups and form into really amazing builder teams. But we want to really broaden that and get into some AI and algorithmic systems for recommendation. Be as good as Netflix is what I like to say.
Sorry, I have to jump in. I don't want to interrupt the stream of fascinating things, but I'm going to have a lot of questions about learning. But Squid Game, did that become a thing?
Oh, absolutely.
It did instantly. Yeah. We saw a top room based on Squid Game, like within days of the phenomenon.
Yeah, it made crazy numbers. And it was top for I don't remember, 3 weeks until Poppy's Playhouse came out, and that blew it out of the water.
I think the creator of the Squid Game room was very young too. I think that's 14, 15-year-old who just made a bunch of money.
Yeah. Awesome.
Excellent.
Live your memes in Rec Room. That's
all these cultural phenomena that you can reproduce and create one-to-one experiences almost, and have them become social and generate revenue from them. Excellent.
We get a lot of interesting. Those one-to-one recreations often are very informative in terms of what mechanics can people not quite do yet, what do our tools not quite facilitate, which is something I'm always very interested in, because my job is to bridge that gap.
Right.
So those really popular rooms that get hit really hard are always just hotbeds of information.
We briefly had the chance to talk before the streaming started and the recording started. And I was telling Audrey I was reading about V2 chips, and you said, what did you say, Audrey?
Which part? Sorry.
V2 chips. Like working on them. That must be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot more kind of human readable than the first version, and it's a lot of fun to work on that, just because that is what people make the gameplay out of. It's the intersection of a lot of people being there, and then how you can interact with stuff. And there's just so many very interesting, very difficult problems in making something really powerful like that understandable to our target persona we call Tracy, somebody who's 13 or 14, smart, has a lot of energy for investigating stuff, but doesn't know anything about computer science coming in. So a high technical ceiling basically, but starting from the ground. And it's turning a system like that into something that has consistent enough rules for people to intuit their way through it comes at the risk of reducing the power of it quite a bit, which we don't want to do, because we want people to be able to make anything. So that's the circle I'm trying to square most of the time, is how do we make it approachable without cutting off some of the interesting possibilities.
Yeah, I think you guys have been hugely successful at that. The first class that I took in Rec Room was a circuits class before I knew how to build anything.
A lot of heavy lifting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were mostly player run too.
Yeah.
We kind of organize some of it now, but that's mostly just people in game. We give them some special special swag. They get a fancy maker pen and some fancy teacher robes as a, thanks for their service. And yeah, that's mostly a community-driven effort.
Yeah. And kids of all ages were in that class with me, like doing just amazing things and starting from scratch, just like I was. Way better than me ended up in the end.
Yeah. But to what you said, Audrey, like, the balance between the power tool and usability, right? Like the easier it gets, maybe the less flexibility it has. And if you look at, I mean, in Machinations, we have a register, which is basically an all-encompassing chip, but that you basically write pseudocode. Well, you actually write math.js, so you can write your functions and you can end up with these really long functions, which are very flexible and very powerful, but the learning curve, right, and getting into that and basically writing code to achieve the circuitry effect. So yeah, I was curious, like, how you go about this, like, I need to close my window. But how do you go about teaching teens or tweens, circuitry, like computer science and logic? And what's the process before it gets within Rec Room, right? Like, what's the pre-production process?
That's a good question. It's a little bit like most of our stuff. Ready, fire, aim. We do a lot of like, let's just get this out there, see how people use it, see what it's missing, and then we'll iterate on it. So a lot of it didn't have a super like fleshed out plan going in. We're just like, okay, let's get the framework there. Let's see what people need. The way I'm looking at it now is really like when we're talking about, I don't know, the pieces you need to make a vehicle. I've been thinking a lot about this week, so it's top of mind for me. You can break it down into little pieces to a certain point, and then you get diminishing returns on complexity versus power, and it becomes an advanced thing. Like as soon as you, for example, detach the steering wheel from the engine, suddenly you have questions of like network authority and can my passenger go mess with my wheel? We don't know who the owner of this car is at any given moment. And like that might be a little much to make a kid think about. So maybe we don't, the first version of this, we don't strip it down that far, even though it's not quite as powerful if you don't have all those individual pieces. The advanced creators will still be served by the simple version, and the opposite isn't always true. But then every subsequent iteration, we want to get more and more granular with the pieces, so the system gets more and more powerful as we go.
Right.
Does that answer the question you're?
Yeah, like high level, I love the ship it first, then take it from there. I mean,
you don't want to spend forever making the wrong stuff. If it isn't useful to anybody, we don't need to put time into it.
Right, and then going in depth from there. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing.
One of the things that I find very fascinating is when we talk about metaverse, we talk about global. And we got a really interesting question, which was, how do you plan to promote, Rec Room in countries where internet connection is very basic? How, there's language barriers. How can we get these kind of players to join, play, and eventually learn and co-create?
Right. Right now, we do have players all over the world. One of our largest populations is in Arabic countries. So we do have a very large Arabic population, as well as, I think, Philippines. We're currently not in multiple languages, but our goal is to get there. It's not currently like on the immediate timeline, but yeah, that is our goal. And it's community driven, right? So our Arabic populations teach other people within their population and play with them often. We do have, and we just did a longitudinal study, and we're pretty considerably above the average for friendly communities that we learned from our longitudinal study. So we've done a great job with trust and safety, and we've done a great job of making the game welcoming and feel like a small world. So we're going to continue to do that. and get there, have it be a worldwide open to everyone when we get the technology in. Do you have anything on that, Audrey?
I think we have started a little bit of localization in a few languages on our tutorial, basically, and some of the main UI screens. We didn't build anything anticipating localization the first time we built it, so it's a little bit of an ongoing process. But we do have a bunch of clubs. That's primarily the main way non-English speaking audiences find each other, is that there's a French language club and an Arabic club and there's a Japanese maker pen class. And groups like that tend to be pretty self-sufficient.
Primary goal of our team coming up next quarter is to, in the next 2 quarters, is to build up clubs and make them more robust, so people in sub communities can find each other and play with each other and help each other out more. That's a good point.
On classes, I noticed there's a game design class.
Mm-hmm.
So how's that, like, as a game designer teaching game design further, right? And then
we've got that's one of our, I think it's one of our community team members, who were primarily good creators that we pulled from the community to help teach and help organize the classes and help build our template rooms and stuff. Yeah, those are not, trained professional designers for the most part teaching those classes. Those are people who have been very successful in our creative contests. We have 3 or 4 contests a year that are big efforts, teams of people, really like coveted prizes. Some amazing stuff comes out of there. And those top rooms, like, they stick around. They stay very, very competitive, for lack of a better word, with whatever's new and hot.
Yep.
And that's where a lot of those game design lessons have come from.
Right. Game designers by trade, right? Like they learned it within. Excellent.
Yeah.
So I actually want to touch on those creator-driven courses, because you go to like a learning platform, and it's very formal. There's the courses laid out, the step by step. There's a progression system to it. There's a bar that fills up. There's assignments, and then with Rec Room, it's very community driven. Each class has its own Discord server. The members are supporting each other. So how do you vet the process, or how does it work, and how do you ensure there's a level of quality that's being hit when it comes to those classes?
We've got the creative team, which I've mentioned. They're typically the ones who organize that. Marisa, the team lead, was one of our top creators, has been for years before we pulled her in to run this team. She wrangles most of that. There are, I think, reviews, and they've got an internal process for quality bar. But for the most part, it's, we assume the best until proven wrong. In a lot of cases, if somebody wants to run a class and they've got interest in the class, they get to run the class. Like, it's just a community effort. We're not like squashing anything we're not 100% on board on. There's another part of that question that I think I lost. But yeah, like, it is certainly anything but formal. We're doing some stuff right now to try to make it a little less chaotic. Like, some of these classes, there's the common accidental new maker pen user problem is to delete the floor on accident, because you can. So we're putting some systems in place now in Q1 to like try to make those classes a little more, not structured necessarily, but safe for people who don't know what they're doing yet, because you have a lot of power as soon as you can use the maker pen. And that should help teachers out. We try to, support them in their classes and keep a beat on what their needs are for those. But yeah, for the most part, the signal for what people want to learn leads directly to classes, and we don't shepherd it super closely. Just try to facilitate.
Yeah, and our creative clubs, teaching clubs, service probably the largest population of any clubs in in the game. And when we're redoing clubs, we're working a lot on helping our organizers be able to organize and put together and manage and put safety nets in place for teaching their classes more effectively and efficiently. And our trust and safety team is doing a great job of finding people and weeding them out that may not be right for teaching or really communicating like human beings in the game. There are those. We want to be welcoming, and we want everyone in our game to be welcoming. But yeah.
You mentioned every class having their own Discord server. So one of the things we're working on right now is trying to pull a little bit more of that communication back into Rec Room. Like, they shouldn't have to set up a Discord server to be able to communicate asynchronously, for example. But that isn't a great experience in the app yet. So that's one of the things we're working on to try to make that better, specifically driven by the class needs, but it should benefit anybody with a club. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so here's something that I find very interesting, because I tried out Rec Room with Chris previously, and he took me on a tour, and we saw these really creative rooms. You know, we went on adventures, we went under the sea, we took a submarine, and it was very interesting. And one of the things that, you know, came to my mind was, it takes a lot to learn the tool and become powerful at it. But once you do, like you were saying, Audrey, you feel a sense of power, right? You have a lot of power, right? And as players get more knowledge of the tool, as they start creating, as they start collaborating with teams, what does Rec Room sort of do to sort of connect these players to teams, or to help facilitate, you know, the growth of these projects? Or, you know, if they're stuck on something, maybe, you know, help them out? Does Rec Room do that, or do they sort of, you know, leave players to create their own things and allow players to explore on their own?
For the most part, we let people explore on their own. We do have a pretty high touch relationship with our creative community on Discord, like our official Rec Room Discord. My Tyleo, who is the co-lead of the Logic team, spends a lot of time talking directly to our top circuit people about, like, okay, what are the problems you're running into? What are the chips you don't have yet? And to the extent that we'll like hop into the rooms with them if they're having a weird problem that we don't know how to solve, because it might be a bug, it might be an implementation thing that we need to make clearer for people. So yeah, it's not a direct like, hey, Rec Room, we need help relationship, but it is a really valuable part of our process to have an open line of communication with the people who use our stuff every day. When it comes to contests, I think it's a lot of just the creative club that we've already mentioned. People self-organize really readily. We do a lot to promote those contests. Like, the token rewards are pretty high. The costume, the avatar pieces you get are pretty cool. You get a lot of publicity if you're one of the top rooms. And so in that respect, we help people out a little bit. You know, we don't always do a great job of this, but we attempt to organize our release schedule such that we won't disrupt any contests that are ongoing by breaking something or shuffling something around while the build period is going on, you know. But yeah, it's a lot of community initiative involved in there, which yeah, I think is the ultimate, like, that's the goal, right? But we don't want to like have to guide or micromanage any of that. We just want it to flourish.
Yeah, I think contests are by far the biggest way that people meet each other and get to know each other and build really strong groups. At the end of each contest, we have an event called the Roomies, which is essentially like a Oscars show for the participants, and it's broadcast over Twitch and YouTube. And like, it's a big deal to some of these kids. Like, we've had like kids crying and thanking everybody, and their mothers in the background just like cheering and whooping because they've accomplished such cool things. And not this contest, but the last one was basically swept by a group of 3 makers who all did great things separately. Like one of them was our best horror character creator. Another one was incredible at circuits, and another one was incredible at sound and being a producer of rooms. He's produced some incredible rooms as a project manager, essentially. And they found each other through contests and through the other projects they've worked on, and they've now become a really tight-knit 3-person team that just makes incredible stuff, bringing all of their talents together. It's just alchemy. It's beautiful.
So what you're saying is it's a lot about creating the tools and the processes that allow people to collaborate together and create, rather than try to nudge them in a specific direction.
I think we nudge.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also our responsibility to make sure like the social rules and framework of the space are going to facilitate that instead of get in the way. You know, like we've got to have enough moderation that people can get rid of people who are hurting the process. And you know, like who can get the maker pen out and who can't, and how does the room owner control that? And like how do people structure their stuff in the way that is best for them to work? And we have what we call inventions, which are when somebody makes a thing that is smaller than a room. To some extent, they can publish it and sell it and share it and move it from room to room. And that's I lost my train of thought a little bit on that one, but that's a powerful building tool for people, and a really important one. We kind of underestimated at first how important it was to move stuff from room to room like that, but there are a lot of ways people could step on each other's toes, like the metaverse equivalent of intellectual property theft or accidental theft. Saving each other's inventions accidentally was a point of contention for a long time. So like it's our job a little bit to make the space friendly for this kind of stuff. But yeah, I see it as more we just want to tend the garden and let it do its own thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we do nudge. Like we create spaces where people can meet and come together. And I think that's a really important part of it too, is creating these social spaces and these social events where people can find each other and grow together. Like on our team, our goal is being a cure for loneliness and a cure for boredom. And that's a big part of it, is making sure people are not lonely and they find things that excite them within the game all the time and meet other people that are excited by the same stuff.
Hey, like if you had the question on the list, Mo, maybe I'm moving it a bit sooner, but the initial question was about UGC, where it started, and then obviously you told the fascinating story of how it started with Rec Room. But I was thinking like UGC in games, where it started, and I'm going back down memory lane, and at least for me personally, I think it's hacking some chicken into a Counter-Strike server or something. Like I'm trying to figure out what was the first time, and it was modding, right? Back in the day, UGC in games. I don't know if you have the original story, like what's the OG of UGC in games, but flipping it back, like flipping it towards the future, because now you can build structures and you can build logic, and you can have all sorts of, everything from light social interaction to Squid Game. And what's the next step? Like, if there's anything missing right now, and where is this heading? Kind of a big, broad question, but
yeah,
like, there's a big one you would add, like the creator tool, or maybe would it be governance agency? Would we all go to work? Could we? How? Anything that you can share from the roadmap?
Yeah, for me.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Can I jump in? It's quick. For me, I think the biggest thing that we're missing right now is the ability for our creators to take things that they've made from room to room and take things into public spaces. Like that's our real next step. And there's a lot of trust and safety implications there. But our team is definitely working on that. So currently, like, it's restricted in a space that it's allowed or in the room that it's created in. And we want people to be able to buy and sell stuff that they create and create their own full economy, and use things anywhere in the game.
That's what I was gonna say anyway.
Oh, okay. It's a big one. It's a big one.
Yeah, like right now you have your little space and you can do whatever you want in your space, but anything you make there is pretty much stuck there. But the invention system I mentioned earlier is the way I can buy that windmill that Chris made and put it in my room. And maybe I can go edit it and mess with how it works, or maybe not, depending on what Chris said as the settings when he made it. But you can't pull that out in like the paintball map, and you can't wear a costume in the rec center yet. And that kind of stuff, like being able to really define your identity in the metaverse instead of in Chris's windmill room, is probably the next big step, at least for us.
Okay. And would it be moving or sort of forking or duplicating or cloning?
I don't know exactly about the implementation of this yet. It'd probably start with costumes, I would imagine, because that just seems like probably the thing everybody wants the most, right? Is to be able to make their avatar look how they want it to.
People love hats.
Yeah. Right now that stuff all gets baked into the room. We'll have to rethink it architecturally to make this happen. But I know it's something people have started talking about because it's very exciting to think about.
So licensing and royalties coming in
probably there. Like I would love it if somebody could have a rec room career as an avatar maker where all they do is make cool costumes for people to buy. And I don't actually remember if this has been implemented or if it's just kind of a floating idea, but you know, people would probably be able to sell limited editions of stuff. You know, only 10 people can ever get this avatar that I made. So it's exclusive and has a, you know, a high price for a short time. We want to offer that kind of tools to people who are making this stuff so that that's a viable career. You're like the costume guy. You're the person who makes cool hats and everybody's glad to have one of your hats.
And then you can be a buyer and seller on the market and be like a marketeer. We do have a marketing and partnership coming up next year, so keep an eye out for that. I can't say anything about it, but it is coming.
I don't think I even know anything about this. It's exciting.
Yeah, limited edition drops of assets. We've seen quite a few of those happening in the metaverse recently.
What? I don't think I know this.
No, just hinting towards, you know, assets like virtual assets, limited editions, making a drop.
I thought you said acid, and I was like,
yeah,
no assets.
Yeah.
No, it's not a. It's not a metaverse talk if nobody mentions NFTs, so I didn't want to go there.
We didn't say anything about NFTs.
Nobody says NFTs. No, definitely. Okay. Yeah. What was your first game? Now I'm curious. Like the first time you did UGC in a game, like what was the first game you hacked or modded?
It's a good question. Probably Gary's mod stuff for me back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me back in the day, I played a ARG called SF0 in San Francisco. That was a player-created pervasive social game where we got to create our own goals for each other, and it was essentially an RPG where you go out in the world and do social practice art pieces. That would be my first one. I have little to no technical skill, so nothing in games, nothing in video games.
We did a lot of like, there was a murder mystery clue map for Gary's mod, so we made our own maps for that because we were mad about something. It was a long time ago. We were all in school at the time, so it was all ridiculous stuff.
And murder mysteries were one of the first user user-generated content in the game as well.
Yeah, that's true. What about you? What was your first?
What about Mo?
For me, it was, there's a Counter-Strike map or like game mode called Zombies, which is very fun. Essentially, there's a map, you have to get to the end, and you're sort of like running, and one person 5 seconds after everyone spawns turns into a zombie, and they can only melee other players, and once a player gets melee, they turn into a zombie as well. And so you have those at the front shooting the zombies backwards while still going to the finish line, and the zombies they grow more and more, and it's usually like 60 players, and so the zombies increase, and suddenly there's more zombies than players, and it's about, do the players reach the finish line or do the zombies win? And that was really fun.
That sounds fun.
Yep. And like the cool thing about Rec Room is like people come up with these ideas that like I would never have thought of. I don't know anybody would have thought of. Like one of the most fun games I played recently is called Runner versus Car. And you're a runner and you're trying to jump around and do stuff, and there are people in cars trying to kill you and run you down, and it is hilarious and fun and exciting and high energy, and yeah, just incredible. Great.
What about you, Mihai?
So I was going, as I said, I was going down memory lane, and I think it's putting chicken in a Counter-Strike map. I think I might have messed with Quake, but I can't recall how. That's the only thing that comes to mind now. Yeah. It was, looking at the way things evolved, of having to learn programming to do anything, and it wasn't easy. And it wasn't easy to do anything. Even if you knew programming, it wasn't easy. But getting a lot of people learned how to code because they wanted to mod their own games, right? Or because they wanted to hack. And now that we have creator tools, which you can do it in VR, and you can do it like constantly lowering the entry barrier and constantly taking down the slope of that learning curve, so that it's so usable, it's so accessible. Like I was looking, just looking at these 3D, it's a 3D modeling tool, right? Like the first time I touched something like that was a 3D Max or Cinema 4D or something. And just comparing the UI UX that you had like 15 years ago with some of these tools versus what's able now, and what you can do, what you can do in Rec Room and what you can do in all across UGC and Metaverse. There's a difference which feels almost like Minority Report kind of level, if you were to go back to what we thought was cool 20 years ago and how everybody would envision the Metaverse. And we're scratching the surface of that, right? And yeah, I find it fascinating. So that's all I have to say.
I think that's a really important part of it though, right? Because you can spend a lifetime mastering Blender and then still find new ways to do stuff 20 years in. And that's very powerful, but also a really high barrier to entry. And, some kids who start off creating in Rec Room may go on to do that because they realize they really enjoy the endorphin rush they get from making a thing. And some may just stay in Rec Room, and either way, like it's very exciting to be part of that.
I think you learn a lot. So that Counter-Strike mode, the zombies mode, I didn't participate in that, but what me and my friend did was we tried to take that mode and do something custom and make like a small server for us and our friends, and we played this custom version of that. But while that didn't really become something huge, we still learned a lot. And before that as well, I remember me and also a friend of mine, we did Zelda fan games for a bit, and there was a huge community around that, and sprites and assets and these huge projects and recreating Ocarina of Time in 2D, and Nintendo would shut it down, and another one would come up, and the same thing would happen, and it was just people coming together on forums, sharing knowledge, banding together, creating something, probably not going to go anywhere but learning. And now we're at this quote unquote metaverse where people have immediate access to tools, processes. There's so much content being created, teams banding together more formally. There's contests, there's rewards, there's economies and buying and selling, there's global connection. And it's just, as I reflect, I think it's just very fascinated, where we started and where we are and where we're headed.
I remember my best UGC experience, Starcraft maps. Right? Like that was not easy. I don't know if it actually was easy. It was easy to get into it, right? Like it was, can't recall the exact experience how it felt, but it didn't matter. Like that was something you could build and play with immediately and make all these crazy scenarios, like islands or different pathways. And isn't that, because now I remember, isn't that how Dota came to be? Because so we had Eon of Strife, which was a Starcraft map. And then what was the succession? Out of that came out, was it straight to Dota? No, that was Warcraft actually. But I think it had the same engine for map making, right? Like Starcraft, Warcraft. And then Eon of Strife was a Warcraft map, and that sparked off Dota, and then that sparked off League of Legends, and then Blizzard came back and did,
Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah.
Took them a while to figure out they had something there.
Oh, this is a genre we should get into. Yeah.
that feels like the biggest missed opportunity in games, where they had this thing in their hands and they were like, we don't have anything to do with that. I don't know.
Oh, UGC players want to do their own thing. How cute. Let's just ignore that.
Exactly.
So we're close to the hour mark. This is usually where we start winding down. If anyone has any questions, now would be the time to send them. Otherwise, I have one final question, which is, we've talked about sort of the future of the metaverse. We've talked about, the past. We've also touched a bit on the present, but one of the things that I really wanted to hone in on is, this idea of designer and player. And, we're starting to see the barrier blur a little bit. So, as designers, how do we see that relationship? How can we foster players to become designers? We talked a bit about co-creation. We talked a bit about learning. Is there anything else that as designers we should be doing to get players more interested in not just playing, but also in creating and thinking like a designer?
I think it needs to be fun. I think that's one of the most important things we can do, is make the process fun and approachable, so that it's not a burden to attempt it. And beyond that, I think cultivating an ecosystem where people get the feedback that their stuff is fun, or the people are playing it and enjoying it, is also a really important thing we can do for nascent designers to help them, sort out what they want to do and whether or not they like it. If nobody, if you're in a vacuum, you're not going to have the best time. So I think one of the really important parts of any metaverse sort of platform is that the creation and the distribution are kind of happening in the same environment, the same group of people. And one of the places we kind of fall down right now is getting people, is people's relationship with their players, basically, as a creator. We haven't, we're still working on the tools to let people get feedback and talk to their creators in a way that, helps cultivate their progress as a designer and makes them feel valued and, like their stuff is in good hands and being enjoyed.
Some telemetry dashboards in there?
Yeah, probably. I mean, yeah, like people have asked for it. and it's probably something you get like number of visits, and we have some manual. You can like cheer a room to like give it direct kudos, but we don't have a lot of more detailed telemetry that it's available to creators, and they want it, so it'll probably happen someday.
So we have one final question from the audience, which is, what learnings can other domains take from the gaming UGC space?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I mean, this is I think this is more well known, but people are the best content. Like, people are the most fun toys. We wouldn't be Rec Room right now if people weren't playing with each other and creating and bouncing off of each other and just being humans, being brilliant together. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, you know, your people are the most valuable part of any ecosystem. So listening to what they want instead of telling them what they want is probably a pretty important part.
Yeah, I can, so that, what they said, but also I think we're seeing a increase in, so, you know, Web 2.0 was about prosumers. It was like, now we can all create, we can all do blogs, and we can all do, and as soon as you start doing a blog, you understand how difficult it is to maintain it. And it's always been skewed, like less than 1% actually creating, and then you have some engaging with it, and most of them are lurkers. And I think these percentages are starting to shift towards people becoming more and more empowered by the tools and more empowered by the creator train of thought. And I think we'll all expect to see people's creations, like that 1% or less than 1%. I think it's going to constantly increase and increase the price. You get it. That's my 2 cents.
Right. So no more questions. But it's been an amazing discussion. I wanted to thank you guys for being here today and for talking with us. I think first of all, it was a very productive discussion. You really answered all the main points we wanted to hit. And second of all, it was a really fun, laid back discussion. We got to reflect. We got to talk about, you know, our own history with UGC. And we got to just casually talk about the future. It felt more of like a discussion among friends rather than a formal webinar. So thank you guys for joining us today. And thank you to the audience for joining and for sharing your questions and insights. Machinations does have a Discord server. Check us out. A lot of conversations going on there. Is there anything you guys want to share about Rec Room before we close off?
Come join the fun.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking for people, and it's a great place to work. And I think in my entire career, it's probably a place where people have the most fun and do the best work, and very, very high level of talent here. And I'm super excited to be a part of it. You could too.
There we go. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks for joining, guys. Bye, everyone.